Now, when it comes to the Legend of Zelda franchise, Nintendo usually focuses on one thing: the main series games. We rarely see or hear about a spin-off title related to the Zelda franchise, and personally, I have no idea why that's the case. The only stuff we ever got was Link's crossbow training, Hyrule Warriors, and Cadence of Hyrule. That's kind of it. It really is a rare thing. While the Super Mario series has hundreds of spin-off titles, with some being masterpieces and others are kind of trash. However, originally they wanted to make another Zelda spin-off game, but in the end it never saw the light of day. However, recently a lot of information about this game was leaked, and so we got to see stuff no one had ever seen before. So what is the game about? What did it look like? And on which console were they going to release it? Well, let's look into all of this. But first, introducing my new store, Wily.gg, the place to buy your new games and get your hands on eShop cards for Nintendo as well as Xbox. And don't forget, use code Wily at checkout to save 10%. Now let's continue. Alright, like I mentioned, there are barely any Zelda spin-off games out there in the world. It's just a rare thing, but if you think about it for a second, it doesn't really make sense. The world of Hyrule is filled with interesting characters and amazing stories, but for some reason they barely do anything with it. And the first time we really saw them do something with it was during Hyrule Warriors. Especially in the most recent entry, they really started to play with some really cool concepts and story elements. Now sure, it wasn't exactly what I wanted, because I would love to see something more dark like we saw in Zelda Majora's Mask, but still it went into the right direction. However, when I found out about this cancelled game, I quickly noticed that it was everything I ever dreamt of. A game that would focus on an interesting tribe that plays a big role in the series, and it would also have a dark twist. Now all of the info for this game was actually leaked during May 2020, when someone by the name of Shine Sparkers published a series of links to the online portfolio of Sammy Hall. He was a former Retro Studios contract artist who worked on concept art for a cancelled Zelda game based on the Sheikah tribe. And this wasn't the only game that was leaked. We also got information about a Super Mario game, but if you want to know about that, you gotta check out the video on my channel. Now in this unreleased game, you would explore the dark side of the Zelda timeline, the one where Link didn't win, and you would explore what happened to the last male Sheikah after Ocarina of Time's bad ending. And while there isn't any game footage, they did create a bunch of concept art for this game, and these drawings were noted as being used for pre-production of Retro Studios' Sheikah Zelda project between 2005 and 2008. So with that time frame in mind, we can assume that it was planned to be released on a Nintendo Wii or the Wii U. Now Nintendo and their studios had never done something like this before, especially back in those days. And luckily enough, we got more info on this game. It was going to be some sort of action JRPG, but it never went beyond pre-production sadly enough. And according to info on the page of the artist, this Zelda game would have been filled with wacky and weird stuff, and it would have been 10 times weirder than anything we had seen before, which is quite impressive because a game like Majora's Mask was quite odd. But as soon as you actually look into the ideas behind this game, you quickly find out that it is very strange, because it was going to cover the origin story of the Master Sword, which is different from what we got in later Zelda games. It starts off with the backstory of the Sheikah and how they all died thanks to Link's defeat at Ganon's hands. And then within the bad ending of Ocarina of Time, it was going to explore the last male Sheikah's journey transforming into the Master Sword, all while the Dark Gerudo are giving their 100-year birth to Ganon. As you can imagine, this would have been very different from what we saw in later games like Skyward Sword. In that game, we got a new origin story for the Master Sword. It was crafted by the goddess Hylia and first known as the Goddess Sword, and was later forged into the Master Sword by the goddess's chosen hero and its spirit, Vi, who bathed it in the 3 sacred flames located across the land that would become the Kingdom of Hyrule. And then, after Zelda's blessing, who is the mortal reincarnation of Hylia, it transformed into the true Master Sword. However, in this game, there would be a completely different origin story for the mythical blade. But in a lot of ways, it's still similar to what we got in Skyward Sword. Vi was the creature inhabiting the Master Sword just like the Sheikah would do in this cancelled game. Heck, if you look at Girahim, you can see that they recycled concepts into that character. because he kinda reminds me of a Sheikah and can transform into an evil version of the Master Sword. But this isn't all. If you look at the crazy concept for this cancelled game, it reminds me a lot of Lovecraftian, fantasy, and post-apocalyptic themes. And so I started to think, what could have influenced them to go in this kind of direction? It is something we normally never see in Zelda games after all. Well, if you look at the concept art for Twilight Princess and compare it to the concept art of this cancelled Sheikah game, you can see that this could have influenced them. For example, some of the artwork for Beast Ganon, the look of Gerudo Ganondorf, the early versions of the Shadow Beasts, and even Midna together with Wolf Link look similar to the concept art for this cancelled game. And some concepts were even seen in other games. For example, in one screenshot, you can see what looks like a floating Hyrule castle, which was also seen in Ocarina of Time during the adult era, and even in the trailers for the sequel to Breath of the Wild. And another thing you can see is the Windfish, who is flying through some sort of temple. Stuff like this reminds me of other Zelda games, or concept art of other Zelda games. But I will admit, a lot of the stuff that we saw was never seen in a Zelda title before, not even in artwork. We can see a ton of new freaky enemies that might remind you of a game like Majora's Mask or Twilight Princess, but still it is very different. And this also goes for the locations, which look very modern and dystopian, almost as if it was taken from a movie like Blade Runner. Now in the end, after all of this was found, the artist deleted it all. But as you could have expected, people saved it, and IGN even interviewed the guy. He told them he came up with the idea together with some other ex-Retro Studio employees, and they were known as... Alright, here we go. Again, I am bad at names. Mark Puccini, Todd Keller, and Kainan Pearson, and the game was cancelled because the people I just mentioned left the company. And so this project and the other game that they worked on died. And interestingly enough, around 2008-2009, many video game websites published rumors about a Retro Studio Zelda game featuring Sheik. And of course, many thought these claims were false. I mean, people online come up with all kinds of weird rumors after all that turn out to be fake, as you could have seen in a lot of my videos. But clearly, those rumors back then were actually true. But by that time, the project was already cancelled. And so, sadly enough, this gem was thrown into the trash. Although some elements of this game were used in future titles like Skyward Sword, which I'm pretty happy about, because some of these concepts were certainly genius. But before you go, be sure to check out some of my other videos by clicking on the screen right now or in the upper right corner. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know Zeltech covered this as well, but I tried to cover it from a different angle by comparing it to later Zelda games and earlier Zelda games that it drew inspiration from. Still a good video by Zeltech, don't get me wrong, my boy, my homie, mad lad. But yeah, I tried to give it a different spin, different look, different angle, different whole thing, you know? I still hope you enjoyed it. If you have any ideas, leave them down below. Be sure to subscribe, click the bell button, do all that good stuff. And I read the comments, so if you leave comments in the first week, I will see it. Bye!